Welcome to This Explainer. Look, right now we are all living through one of the most massive strategic and economic shifts of our lifetime. The NATO alliance has recently entered a profound era of sustained rearmament. But here's the thing, this isn't just a military story. What we're really looking at is a fundamental transformation in industrial policy, technological innovation, and everyday economic security.
So, this brings us to the central tension of our explainer. Can record-breaking military spending actually coexist with long-term economic stability? It is an incredibly delicate balancing act. Almost overnight, governments are being forced to weigh massive investments in national security against the desperate need for a healthy, growing civilian economy.
Section 1. The End of the Peace Dividend. Waking up from the post-Cold War era.
To understand where we are, we have to look at how burden sharing evolved. During the 1990s and early 2000s, a lot of allies benefited from what economists call the peace dividend. With the Cold War in the rearview mirror, governments could safely slash military budgets and pump those funds straight into healthcare, education, and infrastructure. But rising geopolitical threats totally ended that era. After Russia's annexation of Crimea, the 2014 Wales Summit set a baseline target of 2% of GDP for defense. And then, well, everything accelerated. Driven by the 2022 invasion of Ukraine and just a general rise in global instability, the 2025 Hague Summit completely shattered those old expectations, dropping a staggering new target, 5% of GDP by 2035.
Section 2. The 5% Framework. Rethinking National Security.
Okay, let's dive into this breakdown because this new 5% commitment fundamentally redefines what defense spending actually means in the modern world. It splits into two crucial parts. A baseline of 3.5% goes toward core defense. That's your traditional military stuff, personnel salaries, churning out ammunition, buying weapons, and force mobility. But notice that 1.5% carved out for broader security and resilience. NATO recognizes that modern threats aren't just tanks rolling across a border anymore. They're cyber attacks, they're coordinated disinformation. So that 1.5% is specifically dedicated to securing critical infrastructure, energy grids, supply chains, and advanced tech.
Section 3. Economic Boosts and Burdens. The Keynesian Push and Pull.
From a demand-side perspective, all this defense spending acts as a massive fiscal stimulus. When a government signs a huge defense contract, that money immediately injects into the local economy. We are talking about serious job creation for highly skilled workers, engineers, software developers, manufacturing specialists, and that leads directly to industrial expansion. Think about it. A single procurement contract for naval vessels or advanced electronics can support thousands of smaller businesses across aerospace, steel, and semiconductor supply chains. Honestly, a single military base can function like a small city, acting as a regional anchor economy that supports local infrastructure and generates massive tax revenues.
But all this stimulus raises a really tough question. Does simply spending more money automatically guarantee more security? While those economic boosts sound fantastic on paper, we have to face the harsh realities of opportunity costs and the very real burdens placed on the supply side of the economy. Now, what's really interesting about this is the trade-off. Economic resources are strictly limited. You only have so much money and so many workers. This creates a crowding out effect. Every single dollar a government borrows or allocates to defense is literally a dollar pulled away from productive civilian investments, things like public education, healthcare, and commercial R&D. Plus, the defense sector starts directly competing with civilian firms for scarce skilled labor. When top-tier cybersecurity specialists and AI researchers migrate to defense contractors because the wages are higher, it can actually slow down innovation in the broader commercial economy.
And the data completely backs this up. Research shows that the economic returns on defense spending are non-linear. Moderate military expenditure, generally keeping it under 2% of GDP, can actually support economic growth by providing better security and sparking industrial activity. However, if you sustain spending substantially above that 2% mark, advanced economies start seeing diminishing returns. Why? Because those extra resources are increasingly displacing the highly productive civilian investments we just talked about.
Section 4. The Fiscal Debt Challenge. Unequal burdens across the alliance. The harsh fiscal reality is that figuring out how to actually fund this 5% mandate varies wildly depending on where you sit on the map. Frontline states bordering potential threats, like Poland or the Baltic nations, they prioritize defense first. For them, being geographically close to danger totally outweighs short-term budget pressures. In contrast, highly indebted Southern European economies face a much tighter balancing act. Bumping up defense spending for them might require hiking taxes, running larger deficits, or making really painful cuts somewhere else. And then you have industrial powerhouses like Germany.
They possess massive manufacturing capacity, for sure, but they face strict constitutional limits on borrowing. So they have to creatively navigate their own domestic debt rules just to fund this rearmament. Section 5. Inputs versus real capabilities. The threat of defense inflation.
Let's walk through how this builds, because there is a absolutely critical difference between just throwing money at a defense budget and actually generating operational military power. Step 1, governments rush in with massive new orders for aircraft, drones, and ammunition. Step 2, if your industrial capacity is limited, this sudden rush creates severe supply bottlenecks and labor shortages. Step 3, this naturally leads to skyrocketing production costs and way longer delivery schedules, which brings us to Step 4, the government ends up paying significantly higher prices without getting any proportional gain in actual military capability. Without careful industrial planning, you don't get more security, you just get defense sector inflation.
But despite all these logistical headaches, we have to remember the underlying economic logic of deterrence. War destroys infrastructure, physical capital, human capital, and financial markets. It ruins investor confidence and international trade. Ultimately, economic prosperity completely depends on security. Businesses simply won't invest without protected property rights, and global supply chains rely on predictable conditions. In this sense, military spending functions as essential macroeconomic insurance. It protects the broader economy from catastrophic disruption.
Section 6. The innovation dividend. When military tech goes commercial.
And this brilliantly illustrates the crossover we often see. Throughout modern history, defense spending has accidentally driven massive, unexpected leaps in commercial technology. Take ARPANET, which was funded by the US Department of Defense and eventually evolved into the modern internet we all rely on today. Or look at GPS, originally designed purely for military navigation, and now it completely underpins global logistics, agriculture, and literally the map app on your smartphone. The military origins of these tools have thoroughly transformed everyday civilian life.
This historical pattern is exactly why NATO's new framework allocates that 1.5% specifically towards broader security and dual-use technologies. The priority targets today? We're talking artificial intelligence, quantum computing, robust cybersecurity, space technologies, and next-generation semiconductors. Investing in these areas doesn't just lock down defense networks, it has massive commercial potential. These are the dynamic sectors that are going to enhance global productivity, create high-value commercial industries, and essentially determine long-term economic competitiveness for decades to come.
So the crucial point is this. The true test for policymakers isn't just about opening the checkbook. It's ensuring that every single additional dollar actually enhances our deterrence while still supporting a thriving civilian economy. As this massive global shift unfolds, we have to ask ourselves, are we simply spending more, or are we spending strategically enough to secure both peace and prosperity? Thanks for watching this explainer, and we'll see you next time.